Hello everybody, how are you doing this morning? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and boy, a very weird story is going around right now about Sony looking at actually making a new PlayStation Handheld, and it's got some people talking about and thinking about and comparing it to the concept of the Wii U, which I find very interesting. I actually don't think the comparison makes as much sense as some people, and I also don't even think that this exact version of the handheld, if this rumor is true by the way, it sure does not sound like the kind of thing that any of us really want. So this is being reported by Tom Henderson over at Insider Gaming. And it's a very curious thing because there has been some conversations about Sony making some kind of new handheld over the past few months. The conversation was gaining ground. I don't really think that there was a whole lot of evidence to the fact, but the conversation was out there, and now we suddenly have this new piece of information and this new report that, again, it's kind of like a rumor slash leak. They're basically saying we can now finally report that a new PlayStation handheld is in development, but it's still not actually like a fact yet. Sony obviously has not confirmed it, but there's been so many conversations around the possibility of like a PlayStation 5 Pro or a PlayStation 5 Slim, and Sony moving into new phases of the PlayStation 5 generation, which feels very weird. And of course, they just recently launched a newer version of the PlayStation VR, which I don't really follow any of that stuff, but to my kind of vague offhand knowledge, I don't think that that's really been performing very well or selling very well, and I don't think a whole lot of people have been very satisfied with it. I might be wrong, but just again, from some of the few things that has come across my kind of news feed, that's just what it seems like. And so, you know, I like Sony. Obviously, I have a PlayStation 5. I've owned all of their consoles, and even though I'm a Nintendo fan first and foremost, I love all three companies in the industry. I have all of the platforms, and I play my PlayStation 5 a lot. Nowadays, I probably play it more than my Switch, if I'm being honest. So before I get any deeper into my opinions, let's just actually talk about what's actually being quote-unquote reported here. And again, I'm going to have the article linked below. It's coming from Insider Gaming. And they basically are talking about this device that currently, apparently, again, rumors, but apparently is being codenamed the Q-Lite, which is a very strange device. And what it's supposed to do, I guess there were some early concerns before I looked into this here this morning, before I started working for the day to actually make this video. I guess there were some concerns that this was going to be a cloud handheld device. And of course, that would have been a huge problem. And apparently they're saying that that's not actually what it is. It's not a cloud streaming device, but it is meant to be solely a PlayStation 5 controller with, I think, an 8-inch touchscreen screen built into it, basically like a DualSense controller. And it is meant to operate solely via remote play from the PlayStation 5. Some of you guys may know that Sony recently launched a remote play app that allows you to any device, a tablet, a phone, a laptop, whatever. You can connect a controller and your device to the PlayStation 5 app, and so you can then basically stream your game, I guess, from your PlayStation 5 to the device you want to play on instead. And so there you go. You can play on your phone or a computer or whatever, but it's actually running through your PlayStation 5, which is fine. It's neat. That kind of stuff doesn't ever really appeal to me or do anything for me in my gaming life. I don't really play stuff that way. I don't even play my Switch portably anymore. I've talked about many times, but I know some people like that stuff, and it doesn't really allow you to like leave your house necessarily, because I think you have to be pretty close to your PS5 as far as I understand how these remote play apps work. But it is what it is, and so that has launched, and so apparently we're just looking at a handheld-specific device that I guess is not a controller for your PlayStation 5, but is probably just going to use this app. It's like specifically designed for this app is kind of what it's being reported as. So it's not so much a new iteration of a PSP or a PlayStation Vita, which in my opinion would have been a lot cooler. It's just a controller kind of that is meant to use this app and stream from your PlayStation 5, I guess? The snippet from this article says this: as for the console's physical features, early prototypes show the console will look a lot like a PlayStation 5 controller, but with a massive 8-inch LCD touchscreen in the center. The device sports adaptive triggers and haptic feedback and will include what you would come to expect from a handheld: volume button, speakers, an audio input jack, etc. So again, like I said, it's basically just a DualSense controller that's got a screen in the middle. And so I don't hate that idea because, As you guys know, I was a big fan of the Wii U, and so we're obviously going to talk about that comparison here. And also, apparently this thing is going to be launching like sometime next year, again, before the theoretical PlayStation 5 Pro is maybe going to launch. So I don't know, man. I love Sony. I love the PlayStation 5, but all of this stuff seems too weird. And if there's truth to all these things, a PS5 Slim and a Pro and this weird handheld device that isn't even like a PSP actual handheld device, it's just very strange. And I feel like they're trying to throw their hands into too many different pots here. And it's like, why don't you just focus on like the one thing that you're pretty good at, which is like the PlayStation 5 home console brand. And if you want to branch out and try your hand again at another handheld device, I think it's a risky move because, you know, it's really hard to compete with Nintendo in this arena, but I think you've got a good shot if you just dove completely into a new handheld device and tried to compete with Nintendo in that arena. They could do okay. Remember, the PSP and the PlayStation Vita, they never really surpassed Nintendo's handheld efforts, but they did do very well for themselves within their own bubbles. They weren't like failures, and they were quality devices. So I would love to see the more modern Sony PlayStation 5 era version of the company try it again. I think that could be cool, even though I don't really play portable devices. Granted, you've got to compete with the Switch, you've got to compete with the Steam Deck, you'd have to compete with whatever the Switch 2 might turn out to be in the next year or so, so things are tricky there, and that's why I think this like half-assed version of like a controller that really only uses this remote play app is just a very strange concept to me. But here's the thing. I've seen some conversations online already, just in the early hours of the morning here, of people talking about how this is like kind of like a Wii U. And I just got to tell you guys, it's not really like a Wii U, right? Because I think that when people compare it to the Wii U, based on just this idea and this rumor, what they're comparing is the idea that it's just a way to play your home console in your hand so that like your TV would be freed up or whatever, right? So your PlayStation 5 is on and you've got a screen device in your hand you're playing your video game on, and it's just not playing on the TV, which was a feature of the Wii U and the gamepad, absolutely. But the main component to the Wii U's overall feature set was the dual screen gaming. It wasn't just playing your console video game in your hand so that the TV was free for something else, or so that you could play in a different room, for example, only within your house. It was so you could also play games that would use two screens at one time. Look at games like Xenoblade Chronicles X and Zombie U and Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, I think it was called, and Rayman Legends, and I don't know, so many other games like Watch Dogs and all these games that would use like real-time maps and real-time inventories. Even the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess ports heavily relied on the dual screen gaming component, the Deus Ex game that released on it. Splinter Cell Blacklist. I mean, there's a lot of games, and one of the core features and components, oh my gosh, I mean, even Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker. I just keep thinking of games in my head here. The main component was that you could have two screens that were operating at the same time. Obviously, not everyone loved that, which makes me sad, because I thought that was the coolest thing, and I still, to this day, miss dual screen gaming. The way the 3DS and the DS family, as well as the Wii U incorporated, I loved that. I thought it was such a fun way to experience games and be immersed in a different way, when games utilized it properly, of course. That's the caveat here. But there were a lot of games that used it well, and that's the thing that I loved about the Wii U and the gamepad. This rumor about this PlayStation handheld device is not a Wii U gamepad. I tell you, if this thing did operate like a gamepad and we were seeing evidence that Sony was going to do something completely crazy and try to themselves step into the dual screen gaming element where they were going to start making games that would use this as a second screen, that would be incredible, but they're not going to do it. The sad reality is, outside of the DS family, dual screen gaming just didn't take off. And you could even argue, oh, it hurts my soul to say this out loud, but you could argue that the Wii U might have actually been the device that killed dual screen gaming, which, God, I hate that, because I think the Wii U did it so well for a ton of games. But the DS in a handheld fashion worked, right? That whole family, the DS and 3DS families, even the 2DS. I mean, they were huge selling device, and it all did very well, and people liked dual screen gaming when they were playing on little DS handheld devices. Nintendo tried to take that into the home console arena with a fantastic Wii U device that they did not market well, and they didn't have enough games that took advantage of it. And as we all know, it sadly failed. And since then, since the shutting down of all things, 3DS, dual screen gaming kind of died. And I think it's because the Wii U was not a home console success using this concept. And so why would any company, especially a company like Sony, decide to do that? It would sadly feel like a step back, I think, for the industry and a lot of companies. I wouldn't see it as a step backwards. Again, my personal opinion is that I think it's a step forwards. I would love to see companies try to do this again, but again, it just isn't going to happen. Sony's not going to do it. Sadly, Nintendo will probably never do it again. And so we come back to this rumor about this PlayStation handheld device, and it's not exciting to me because it's not a dual screen experience like the Wii U, or like some people are mistakenly confusing it as, and it's not even just a regular old traditional handheld. It's not a PSP 2 or a PS Vita 2. It seems to be just a controller with a screen that streams from your PS5 to it. And it's probably going to be a couple of $100. How is that going to compete with the Steam Deck and the Switch? What is it going to do to enhance the PlayStation 5? If this thing ends up being just a $50 or an $80 controller with a screen, that's a different story. But it's being sold as like a handheld device. And so I don't really know why anyone would really need or want this. So the jury is still out. Again, this is a rumor, and obviously I'm talking about this like it could be real because we don't know if it's going to be real, but they seem to be pretty confident in it, and I think that there's a bit of a track record here, so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, and if this device is real, and if it's exactly as described, or what if it's better than what it's being described? What if it actually does something more like what people would actually want? That could change the game. So we'd have to wait to see A, if it's real, and B, what it even is if it is real. We don't even frickin' know if the PS5 Pro is real, and everyone's talking about that like it's basically a done deal. So I think everyone's jumping the gun. This thing is not a freaking Wii U. Anyone telling you it's a Wii U isn't really being honest, or just doesn't really know what they're talking about. Because if you know what the Wii U was, it's not what this PlayStation handheld rumored thing is. They're not the same thing. So that's what I think, and yeah, I guess that's about it.